It is my true pleasure to welcome someone who has significantly shaped the magic and legacy of one of the most beloved brands in the world. Last year, this company celebrated its 100th birthday. Yes, I'm talking about the one, the only, the Walt Disney Company. Bob Iger has served as the CEO of Disney for almost 20 years and spent 8 years serving on Apple's board. His visionary leadership has guided Disney through significant transformations from its acquisition of Pixar, Lucasfilm, and Marvel to its launch into streaming with Disney Plus and the opening of Disneyland in Shanghai. All that while shepherding Disney as one of the world's most iconic brands in the world. I've personally loved learning from Bob as an investor, advisor, and board member here at Canva. So it's my pleasure to welcome Bob to the stage. Bob, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I must say, this crowd rivals Disney crowds that I sit in front of often with their enthusiasm and their passion for, in this case, Canva. So I feel it. I feel your energy.
We do have the best community in the world. I mean,
it's a great
competition.
Yes.
When we first met, you shared a fun story about how you first met Canva. I thought it might be fun to share with our team and community today.
Yes, I was not familiar with Canva, and one Christmas, my wife gave me a very large and complicated coffee machine. She wanted to turn me into a barrister. I had just retired from Disney at that point. I guess she thought I needed something to do or learn. And she presented it to me in New York, where we were spending Christmas, but the machine was in Los Angeles. And so she created a presentation for me of the machine. And I said, and it was fantastic. It looked like it was the company that manufactured the machine that made the presentation. She said, no, I made the presentation. I said, how did you do that? She said, Canva. And the rest is history.
So good. So I'm curious, can you now use that coffee machine? Or did Disney get in the way?
Disney's gotten in the way. I was just getting good at it when I went back to work. So do not try my espresso.
We have a very diverse audience today, from students to solo entrepreneurs to folks in large corporations. And something that joins us all is the importance of storytelling. And you are obviously working with some of the best storytellers in the world. I'm really curious, what qualities do you look for in a story?
Well, we look for many qualities, but the ones that I think resonate the most, and I'm in a way drawing from Walt Disney himself when he talked about storytelling, are the ones that touch people's hearts. It's not about telling stories for young people or old people or parents or children or grandparents. It's about telling stories that actually, touch everyone inside of them. Because I think when they do, they have a huge impact, not just in the moment, but sometimes forever. So that's the first thing I look for. I look for, some level of satisfaction. Did it entertain me? Did it thrill me in some fashion? Did I learn something from it? But first and foremost, great entertainment that touches people's hearts.
Some good principles to get behind. You work with so many talented storytellers. What's your secret to getting the best out of these talented storytellers?
I mean, working with storytellers is something that at Disney we do every day, and I'm fortunate in my role that I get to do it just about every day as well. The first thing, and it's a thrill to do that, by the way, as a job, it beats working in many respects. The first thing I try to do when I am interacting with a creator about their story is to respect the fact that in almost all cases, the story they want to tell emanates from within them. It is who they are. They almost own it in a very deeply personal way. And in recognizing that, you have empathy for them in a way, in terms of knowing and appreciating how they want to tell their story, how they want to bring it forward. It can't just be about us telling them how to tell their story. They need to tell us, and we need to be very respectful of that. Now, we invest a lot in their storytelling, and in many respects, with our resources, enable them to tell their stories or to fulfill their storytelling dreams. And so there's a responsibility that we must take in the storytelling process, but it must begin with this understanding that it's theirs and not ours. You know, it sometimes becomes our intellectual property, becomes part of basically the so-called Disney library. But in reality, it's always theirs because it came from them. And I think when you start with that premise and you establish a mutual respect and an understanding, you can be much more effective at helping them tell their story in the most impactful way.
Absolutely. Do you have a favorite story?
Do I have a favorite story? I have many favorite stories. I get asked this all the time. One of the great things about my job is, I often get a chance to see and hear stories, in their infancy, when they're just really being molded well before they're shared with the world. In fact, sometimes 4 or 5 years. A great animated tale or animated movie takes 4 to 5 years really to create. And I love that experience of hearing it from the beginning and of watching it bloom, watching it unfold, and then ultimately sharing it. And there are many times where I have been part of a process and then been there when it is shared with the world, and that moment of joy that you feel when a global audience experiences the story that I've been hearing about for years, it's a very, I guess, powerful feeling to have. And I've had many moments when great stories have been told have been shared with the public for the first time, and remember them well. I can name a few, but the great thing about it is they're ongoing too. So one of the ones that I remember the most is when we shared Black Panther with the world for the first time. And that was a story that emanated from Marvel comic books and ultimately came through the great creative genius of a man named Ryan Coogler, who ultimately directed the film. And it was Ryan's first big film, and I remember watching him iterate that story, meaning bring it to a point where it could be shared with the world and cheering it on throughout, and knowing that we had something really special, that what he had created would have a real impact. But we only had seen it with a very select group of people. And so when you have something magical, you cannot wait to give it to the world. And it was really, at the premiere, it was the first time I witnessed other people seeing it, actually, other than a group of maybe 4 or 5. And the emotion in the room was so palpable, it was so strong. So that was one that I remember, but there have been many. This is not a plug for one of our upcoming movies. Well, maybe it is. There's a big audience here. But Pixar has a movie coming out in June, which is a sequel to Inside Out.
Oh, I love that. I'm so excited.
Inside Out was created by Pete Docter, who's a great director and writer and helps run Pixar now. I remember when he pitched Inside Out to us, he had an 11-year-old girl, and he was talking about her emotions, and he wanted to tell a story about the emotions within the brain of his 11-year-old daughter, which, when you think about it, you think, wait a minute, that's a movie? Tell me more. And he described it in pitch form brilliantly, and of course it became a film that did extraordinarily well. And some years later, I think Inside Out came out about 10 years ago, he had this idea that daughter, who in real life is now in her 20s, I think, but that daughter was growing up, and he wanted to tell more stories about her emotions. And Inside Out 2 is about the emotions inside the daughter in the brain of a daughter who's just entering puberty, actually. And there are many more emotions in them, and they're harder to contain. They're not quite running wild, and so when he pitched that idea, a couple of new ones are anxiety is one really great one, and you can imagine how that unfolds as a character. So that's one where I've seen it, really, this story coming together almost for a decade, and now becoming a second film. And no one's seen it, really, except for maybe a dozen of us. And it comes out in mid-June, and it's one I just can't wait to have that same experience that I've had many times in the past. It's one of the great parts of this job.
I'm extraordinarily excited to watch that myself. That sounds incredible.
Tell a friend.
Well, our 2.5 million viewers, they can all tell a friend. You'll have a few people show up. So, technology has dramatically evolved the way stories are told at Disney over the last 100 years. And obviously, AI is on the tip of everyone's tongues today. But radical transformations aren't something new for Disney. And so I'm really curious if you could share any of the big transformations that Disney has gone through over the last 100 years or your many years as CEO.
Well, technology has always played a very, very important role in Disney. Walt Disney himself, who founded the company in 1923, was a big believer in using technology in the early days to tell better stories. And he thought that technology in the hands of a great storyteller was an unbelievably powerful tool. It's interesting because one of the reasons I was drawn to Canva is in so many respects, that's what Canva is to the people of the world as well. And that culture, part of our culture, which is view technology as an asset, not as a liability. Don't fixate on its ability to be disruptive, fixate it on its ability to make us better, to tell better stories, not only to tell better stories, but to reach more people. And interesting, there's a yin-yang at Disney too, which I see when I go to Imagineering, which is the technology behind all and creativity behind our theme park attractions. When I go to Pixar, when I go to Lucasfilm and ILM, you see technology working side by side with creativity. And often what happens is the creators challenge the technologists to give them the tools to create at a higher level, to tell stories better. And the technologists sometimes go off and create technology on their own without the storytellers, that when they show the technology to the storytellers, it inspires them to tell certain stories. And it's a great thing to watch. And the disruptive forces of technology over time for Disney have largely been positives and not negatives. Because one, just what I described, disruptive forces of technology enabling people to create at a higher level, enabling us to reach more people. And I think what we urge all of our people to do when they view technology as potentially disruptive is to realize, one, you're never going to get in the way of it. There isn't a generation of human beings that has ever been able to stand in the way of technological advancement. And so with that in mind, what we try to do is embrace it, embrace the change that technology is creating, and use it as basically the sail or the wind behind our backs instead of wind in our faces. And so while I think lately the biggest disruptive force has been in the way in which people consume media, the migration from multi-channel television, satellite and cable, for instance, the streaming is probably the best example of that. Obviously the computer and app-based everything on mobile devices. But in reality, while they've disrupted the way we reach people with our stories, excuse me, and the way people consume them, they have actually enabled us to be better at what we do to reach more people. And so again, technology, while it can be quite disruptive, we always look at it as friend, not foe.
Something you shared with me earlier was that I found beautifully comforting was the story of animation and how that completely transformed that industry. And I was wondering, I think that what I found so interesting about that was the way, as we go through these waves, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry about how the world's going to be after the technological transformation. Do you want to share a little bit about the animation journey for animators at Disney?
Well, as I think we all know, animation really began as hand-drawn animation. Just coincidentally, I watched on Disney Plus the other day a Mickey Mouse short that was done in the 1930s. I just happened upon it. And I was interested in it, and it was pencil drawings of Mickey Mouse in black and white, Mickey and a variety of other characters, 6 minutes long, which today is long for a short. By the way, it's like a mini-series, 6 minutes. And what was interesting about it, what struck me is how compelling it was to watch. It was joyful and just there's a lot of action, it was fun, and actually the personality of Mickey Mouse really came out even though he wasn't speaking. And that's quite interesting because it meant that artists were capable of creating and telling stories and creating real entertainment in the most rudimentary form. and of course dissolved to many decades later when technology comes along, computer-generated graphics, to enable artists to tell stories, animated stories, in ways that are just so much more dimensionalized, really. They've got so much more to them, the color and sound and, and basically a richness of picture. And what's interesting about that is, in some cases, the stories haven't changed, but the manner in which they are told and presented has changed dramatically. And what's great about that is it does maintain relevance. And because I think while 2D animation you can still use to tell a great story, there's something that feels more of this world and more modern when you use all the bells and whistles that technology provides. And that's important too, particularly for young generations of people who are used to basically being entertained in much more visually compelling ways. I think, obviously, computer-generated games would be a great example of that. And so storytellers have to use that technology to stay relevant. And I've watched this unfold, and it's interesting. I started at ABC, which became a part of Disney some decades ago, 50 years ago. So I've been in this business 50 years.
Wow.
So I've watched an unbelievable transition and the impact of technology on everything we do. And what I love about it is that while it is more complex business today, it's in many respects a more exciting business today because of the capabilities that technology has given us. It comes back again to everything that was presented on stage today, too, is Canva's providing those tools that I talk about for people to communicate ideas and creative stories and you name it. And I think it's important for people who are managing companies today through continued technological advancement to be aware of the fact that technology, while it can be daunting in terms of adopting it and using it and adjusting to it, it also can be an extraordinarily powerful thing to make your business better.
I could not agree more. It's incredible the way technology has transformed, but the essence of being able to communicate ideas and tell stories has just maintained the same common thread throughout all of these different technological revolutions.
Yes. One interesting thing, by the way, which maybe the audience would be interested in, is when storytellers in animation begin to mold their story, they actually draw, or someone draws for them, the whole film. So before Pixar or Disney Animation starts rendering computer-generated animation, which is a highly expensive process because of just the sheer number of hours that it takes, they create their story in the most rudimentary form, going back to the 1930 style of Walt Disney. And we watch those movies then, that we watch a movie in that form, with sometimes temporary voices and no music, and we try to figure out whether this is a story well told or not, or whether it can be and what needs to be done to it. And it's just fascinating to think about it because at the very essence, what these films are great stories that can be told in many different forms, but in today's world, the most advanced form technologically tends to win because it's what the audience has so gotten used to and almost demands.
It's so interesting. Another question. So as Disney grew, how did you maintain its core culture and such a strong sense of brand that it's so well known for? And any advice for Canva as we aspire to become a beloved brand worldwide?
I was thinking about this while you were in the latter part of your presentation, where you and Cliff were really articulating values. And watching the company that I worked for 50 years, and considering everything that has gone on in the world over that time, there's a lot of pressure on companies in their desire to continue to be relevant in a world that doesn't look anything like the world looked like when they were founded, including 10 years ago for Canva. There's this belief sometimes that adjusting your values is necessary to adjust to a world that has changed. I happen to disagree with that tremendously. Canva is what it is today, and Disney is what it is today in many respects because of the values that were imbued in the brand and in the company and in the culture years ago. And that value creation should be ongoing. And abandoning those core values that got you where you are, or got Disney where we are, is, in my opinion, results in basically the extinction of brands and companies. And I often study brands because of Disney being such a large and well-known global brand. And if you look at all the brands in the world in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, the years that Disney existed, and study which ones were the most popular then or the most known and which are the most known today, there are only a couple of companies that have had global brand value and presence, that have global brand value and presence today that did in the 1920s. That's Disney and Coca-Cola, interestingly enough. And when you think about it, why is that? What happened to all those companies along the way? You'll quickly conclude, if you study it carefully, that they abandoned their core values. And that could be a variety of things. It could be how they behave as a citizen of the world. It could be the values that they infuse into the product that they create. It could be just basically the values of how they treat their people and their customers. And getting cavalier about it, this constant belief that the values in your storytelling have to change because the world is different today. Those sorts of things, those pressures, often are a result, in my opinion, in the failure of companies and brands as opposed to the opposite. So my advice would be, if you believe that the values that you not only articulated, but you applied from the very beginning that have resulted in Canva being as wondrous as it is today, then stick with it. Stick with those.
That is an extraordinarily astute insight. And if we could have Canva continue to grow in its core values and in its offering over the next 90 years and be where Walt Disney is in 90 years' time, I mean, that would be extraordinary. So we certainly hope to aspire towards that.
I vote for that.
Thank you so much, Bob. So unfortunately, that brings us to the end of this talk. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor and privilege to be here with you today.
Thank you. If you don't mind, thank you for bringing me into the Canva family. It's been a thrill and a joy to watch you and the whole team thrive and grow. Today's presentation was highly motivating for me. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you all.